I slay dragons every day. Most people want to be where the success is, but they don't want the endless challenges.
Fawn Weaver isn't afraid of big challenges. Just 8 years ago, she entered the competitive spirits industry, launching a whiskey brand in a notoriously homogenous and male-dominated space. Now, Nearest Green Distillery is the fastest-growing American whiskey brand with a $1.1 billion valuation and countless awards to its name. Fawn never intended to create a whiskey. Her background is in communications, and her thinking was that she would go write a book about Nathan Nearest Green. Green is the first known African-American master distiller. He's the guy who mentored Jack Daniel. Fawn got deeper into Green's world, even buying the 300-acre farm where Jack Daniel's whiskey was first made. And eventually, a light bulb went off. She could create a whiskey bearing Nearest Green's name. It was a way to honor his contributions while also shaking up a centuries-old industry. In her recent book, Love and Whiskey, Fawn talks about how her path has been one of relentless determination. Here's how Fawn Weaver brought a story back to life. Let's just start from the beginning. Talk about the founding of Uncle Nearest.
The founding of Uncle Nearest happened in 2016. I came to this area, the Lynchburg, Shelbyville area, and I came to uncover the story of Nearest Green, the first known African-American master distiller. It had been something that had been told in this area through oral history for a while, but it had never been proven. And once I got here and began doing research for the book, Love and Whiskey, and once I began interviewing all of Nearest's descendants, Jack Daniel's descendants, and just trying to piece this story together, it began to just unveil itself, not just the story and what would be included in the book, but also the fact that he deserved to have something that would continue on for the next hundreds of years, the same way that Jack Daniel has, Jim Beam has, Johnny Walker has, that really there was only one way to tell Nearest Green's story in a manner in which people would remember. And I'd love to say it's going to be the book, but after that, what will carry on his name and his legacy is this brand.
It's so unusual for an entrepreneur to decide to create a business out of a story versus out of seeing a market. Talk a little bit about how you made that jump from saying this is a story that deserves to be told and a legacy that needs to get built to saying, I'm going to build a business around this.
Yeah, this was actually crazy. I'm coming in the bourbon industry, in which at that time, any statistic would tell you that the consumer of bourbon was almost entirely white men. And so I am coming in with a story that is unapologetically African-American, that is Southern to its core. It's a beautiful American story, but there were people when I came into the industry that thought it's an African-American story and African-Americans don't drink bourbon. And what they didn't understand and what they weren't able to wrap their mind around is I realized the only reason the only people drinking bourbon were white men is they were the only ones being marketed to. And so coming into this industry, it was very simple. We are going to create one of the best products that this industry has ever seen, which we have done, but we're going to make sure that we share it with everyone, that none of our marketing is going to be specific to any one group. And coming into the industry, I got so much advice about the demo I had to have. And so if someone would say to me, so what's your demographic? I would look at them, whether it was a distributor or retailer or whoever, and I would look at them and try to guess who they thought my demographic should be. And then I would just parrot it to them. And literally, that's what I did for probably 2.5 years before I finally shared that what we were doing was targeting every single one of those groups that I had parroted to all of these people, because general marketing tells you, do not market to everyone. You must have a demographic. It's too expensive to not market just to a demographic. And I said, I do have a demographic, everyone.
Right. But you couldn't say it. So you had to, so you just said what people wanted to hear. What's the lesson out of that?
If going with your gut is going against the grain, then don't share it until it's worked. because you'll have too many people, especially if you're going after investment dollars, that will tell you that can't work. And then they will second guess your knowledge. They'll second guess whether or not you know what you're doing.
Was there ever a point where you were like, shoot, maybe they're right? Or did you always have this belief in yourself around how big this could get?
Yeah. So coming into this industry, my thing was no one can tell me how to do this because this country is 70% women and people of color. Women hold the greatest purse string in this country. Any person who gave me advice, I was confident to reject it because I understood that this industry wasn't built for me. No one that looks like me, no woman has ever succeeded at a high level. This country, essentially our entire spirits industry, is run by a second tier. That is the most powerful group in the spirits industry. It is not the maker. It is not the consumer. It is the distributor. And so having to learn that particular tier was one of the most challenging things. And I'm grateful that I brought in someone very early on who was unflappable and who was not going to give up, because coming into this and learning it and then having to hold this tier accountable when I'm not one of the big six. And in our country, where you have over 90% of the volume of alcohol that is sold in this country are just 6 players. And here I come in trying to get their attention. Good luck with that. And so what I could not do was take the advice of those who either have come before me and were a part of the big six or have tried to make it work and haven't been able to. I had to do it in my own way. I had to go with my gut. And I confirmed my gut with data. And so even though I wasn't necessarily listening to the experts in the industry, I was on the ground collecting my own data. So where they're looking at things on a graph in black and white, I was showing up in different cities every single day and going door to door and talking to the retailers directly, talking to the beverage directors directly, talking to the buyers directly. I never left that to the distributor tier, which is usually who does that. I wanted to do that myself.
And Fawn, at one point, you had to get your husband to almost like pretend to be the CEO to get calls returned. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, at the very beginning, until my husband became the CEO of Nearest Green Distillery a year ago, up until that point, the first 6 years of this company, the entire leadership team were women, and it's still all women plus Keith. And so coming into this industry, one of the things I realized is my phone calls weren't being returned. Neither was my chief business officer. Neither was my head of whiskey operations. And we all knew separately our calls weren't being returned. And so I said, listen, send me a synopsis of what you need. And I sent it to my husband. And I said, babe, I just want to test something out. I have a feeling that people in this industry aren't used to hearing women in power on the other end of the line. And so I asked for him to reach into all the people we had been trying to speak to for months. And with every single one that he called, he either got through right away or he got a call back by the end of the day. And in every single one of those calls, at some point, they would ask him, hey, do you drink beer? You want to get together for a beer? Do you golf? Do you want to golf? And so it was part gender, but it's been a boys club. So I was coming into an industry that had been a boys club for so long. The lesson that I learned there is that you cannot have ego when you're building. If I had been so focused on, well, why don't they give me respect? And if I had done any of that, Uncle Nearest wouldn't be where it is today. I said, okay, this is how they play the game. No problem. Let me play by their rules. And
Incredible.
And I was never bothered by it. If I could do it again, I would do it the exact same way.
It really never bothered you? I think it would bother me.
Never.
Really?
Not for 2 seconds, because my goal was too big. When your goal is this big, you don't have time to sweat the small stuff. That's a Richard Carlson thing, right? Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. And so I knew later down the line, people would know who I was. People would know who built this company. But did I need them to know it in its infancy? Absolutely not. Didn't bother me.
You have not taken any kind of private equity or VC money. You
Nope.
have raised money from individual investors.
Yep.
Talk about your funding strategy. How have you thought about it?
My strategy has simply been, it's important for me to maintain control because I'm doing something in an industry in which someone like me has never succeeded. And so I can't have people giving me advice who have never been in my shoes. I think when you're going into an industry in which there are people that have been in your shoes before, then it might be beneficial for you to have them at the table. But for my purposes, there's literally no one who has ever been here before. So I have to be the lead at this table. Now, I've surrounded myself with incredible advisors. I have people that are invested in my company that do have some of the top VCs and PE companies in this country, in the world, but they're in my company as an individual. And they're very different as an individual because it's their money, their personal money. So I'm having conversations with them directly. Uncle Nearest isn't a line item on a spreadsheet. This is Uncle Nearest.
Right.
And so I think that PEs and VCs, although I'm sure they're great for a lot of industries, but when it comes to a startup like this, in which there's no precedence, I needed to be able to talk to people face to face. And I needed to be able to make mistakes and to pivot. And VCs and PEs, even if they come in with a certain time frame that they want to give you, say they come in and say, hey, we're going to do this for the next 10 years. Well, if the folks in their funds say, no, we want 5 years, well, here comes the great pivot. And guess who gets caught in the middle of that?
That's
Whole
right.
lot of founders. And this legacy and this company was too important for it to continue on for generations, for it not to have the right foundation from the beginning.
I've heard you talk about yourself in a few ways. There's some great lines. I don't look back. My life is marked by radical decisions. All of those are the kind of things you hear great entrepreneurs say about themselves. It means they can charge forward. But I'd love to hear what you're like as a manager and as a leader. How do you think about yourself when you were trying to get a team to move in a direction?
I have two things that everyone in the company knows. One is called HBU, highest and best use of time. So if it is not my highest and best use of time, it usually will not bubble up to me. That's the first thing. The second thing is I am really simple with one policy. If someone else can do it, then someone else should do it. In my company, number one, micromanaging does not work. I have built this entire company on entrepreneurs. Everyone owns their jobs. They own their descriptions fully. And I don't bother that. I hire the best and I get out of their way. And what comes to me are only the things that no one else can do.
So what do you tell people when they look at what you've accomplished and they say, I want to be just like you. This is the path I want to be on. What's the kind of career advice you give today?
Yeah, people who say, I want to be just like you, I really have to question if that's true. Most people want to be where the success is, but they don't want the endless challenges. I slay dragons every day. The amount of challenges that I have to work my way through every single day takes out most entrepreneurs if it happens once. And I deal with it every single day. And so what I tell folks all the time is that failure is not failure unless you give up before you succeed. So here's the thing. To get to where I am, all you have to do is not give up. The issue is most people give up before they get here.
Here's what stood out to me. People underestimated Fawn Weaver, and she turned that into her strategic advantage. By staying focused on her long-term vision and not worrying about immediate recognition, she gave Uncle Nearest the time and the space to grow into what it is today. There's a powerful lesson in that for any leader. Sometimes the best move is to build quietly and steadily until people just can't ignore your success. Fawn also defied conventional marketing norms. The experts told her time and again she had to pick one market to focus on, but Fawn didn't buy it. She believed that the story of Nearest Green and the quality of her product would resonate with all consumers. It's a reminder that sometimes you have to break from tradition to succeed. Now I'd love to hear from you. How do you balance trusting your instincts with following conventional advice? Let me know in the comments.